We had an advisory panel study this issue for more than 6 years. Their report found releasing the treated water into the ocean was more realistic than.
Now, for more, Robert Jacobs, a professor at the Hiroshima Peace Institute, joins me. Professor, the water being released will be treated and diluted, so radiation levels are below what's set for safe drinking water. So do you think that all these concerns are unfounded?
No, they're not unfounded at all. Radiation is being released into the ecosystem. That's never a good thing. It can be diluted as it's released into the ecosystem, but it's never good to release radiation into the ecosystem. It's being done in this case because the Japanese government doesn't see any alternative but to release it into the ecosystem. But if we could, we would never release radioactive material into the ecosystem. There is no safe level. Every bit that enters the ecosystem has the potential to cause harm.
So if it's not a threat to human health, but to the ecosystem, it still is a threat. What kind of environmental damage or damage to marine life could we potentially see?
Well, it could be a threat to human life. Once material is in the ecosystem, it has the potential to bioaccumulate up through the food chain. So some fish may consume particles, other fish will consume those fish. The material will concentrate as it moves up the food chain. It could certainly end up in human beings. Many of the, obviously they've filtered out as much of the material as they can, which is then radioactive waste, which has to be dealt with. But the material that is in the water, some of it, for example, cesium-137, remains dangerous for 300 years. So during that period of time, people who aren't even born yet face the risk that they may eat food that has internalized this material. So it's just a matter of what is the best thing to do in a bad situation. And in this case, you have 100 tons, over 100 tons of radioactive water accumulating per day. This will go on for decades. So it's not possible to keep storing it in these tanks. Some people advocate storing them in the tanks. Whatever we do with it, it's a bad situation. So I think that the fact that the Japanese government is making it clear that the choice they've made, which is to release it into the water, which will be a process that goes on and on for decades because this water won't stop accumulating and accruing, it's a tacit admission that there's nothing that really can be done about keeping more radioactive water from piling up day after day for decades. And so the only outcome they can see is to slowly filter it and release it into the ocean.
So is this really then the best bad option, or there's no other way for it to be stored or safely disposed of?
Well, there are some people that advocate creating huge, permanent, large storage tanks that can be kept on land. In some places where similar materials to this are accrued, it's used to make concrete, and then the concrete is stored as radioactive waste. So there are other alternatives. Even if you stored it in the form of concrete, that's radioactive waste. That concrete will break down, so it's still a long-term burden. So it's hard to say. I think that the fact that they have made the choice to release this into the ocean is essentially an admission of the scale they expect of ongoing accumulation of this material over years, that it's probably too much material to feasibly fix into mortar or concrete or to put into large tanks. So they're acclimating us to the fact that this is the choice that they've made and we'll live with it. I must remind you that, for example, we heard a moment ago that this is a safe level. If we had a choice, we would not be releasing any. So we're releasing this because it's there. It's not that we consider these levels perfectly safe. For example, it's by necessity. So in Japan, the amount of radiation a person could be exposed to was raised 20-fold the first days of the Fukushima accident because people were simply being exposed to it. Once it's a reality, then it becomes something that we have to define for public relations purposes as acceptable, and that's the situation we're in here.
All right, well, that is certainly concerning. Thanks for putting that in to some perspective, Professor Robert Jacobs.